This is the conclusion of Manly Palmer Hall's analysis of the Tarot as written in his masterpiece, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, Chapter 29. So this is where I left off from last time on card number 16. Hall calls the 16th numbered card of the Tarot the Fire of Heaven. In the 1909 Rider-Waite deck, it is called the Tower. This card portrays a tower that is on fire, being destroyed by a bolt of lightning from the sun. According to Hall, this lightning bolt sometimes takes the form of the zodiacal sign of Scorpio, and the tower is a phallic emblem. He surmises that this card is associated with the fall of man. The divine nature of man is the tower. On the card, we see a crown at the top of the tower that is being destroyed. Once the crown and man's divine nature is destroyed, man falls into a lower world. In this lower world, he forgets his divine nature and becomes trapped in its illusory nature. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the tower is depicted as a pyramid whose apex is destroyed by the lightning bolt. The 17th major trump card of the Tarot is the Star. On this card, we see a young girl kneeling with one foot in the water and the other on land. She holds on to two urns and pours the contents onto both the land and the sea. Above her head are 8 stars. The star directly above her is very large and very bright. Antoine Court de Gebelin, who initiated the interpretation of the tarot as an arcane repository of timeless esoteric wisdom way back in 1781, considers this star to be the star of Sirius, and the other 7 to be the sacred planets of the ancients. He interprets the female figure to be Isis in the act of causing the annual flooding of the Nile River, which accompanied the rising of the dog star, Sirius. The figure of Isis is unclothed, and he says this signifies that the rising of the Nile is a necessary precedent to the growth of the plants and flowers from which she will fashion her garments. The symbolism of the bird or butterfly represents growth and resurrection, which are a part of the rising of the waters. The 18th major trump card of the Tarot is the Moon. This card shows the moon, or Luna as Hall calls her, rising between 2 towers, and we see a path winding between them. We are unable to see where the path goes and where it ends. It goes off into the distance to parts unknown. Several animals are pictured on this card. We see a dog and a wolf, both baying at the moon as it rises, and we also see a crawfish emerging from a pool of water. Hall also quotes the interpretation of Antoine Court de Gebelin, who sees in this card another reference to the rising of the Nile River, and proof that the Egyptians believed the inundations of the Nile resulted from the tears of the moon goddess, which in the card are seen dropping from the lunar face. As the tears of the goddess fall into the river, its waters rise. De Gebelin also says the towers represent the pillars of Hercules, beyond which, according to the Egyptians, the luminaries never passed. He also says the Egyptians were known to represent the tropics as dogs, who as faithful doorkeepers prevented the sun and moon from penetrating too near the poles. The crawfish is symbolic of the retrograde motion of the moon. Hall comments that the moon card refers to the path of wisdom, which man follows if he is searching for truth. He will be successful in his quest only if he emerges from the point of illusion. Traversing the path of wisdom requires first mastering the guardians of the gates of wisdom, passing between the fortresses of science and theology, and then following the winding path to the final destination, spiritual liberation. The moon lights the way as he traverses the path and represents human reason, which is a reflection of divine wisdom. According to Hall, in the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the towers are pyramids, the dogs are black and white, and the moon is partly hidden in the clouds, suggestive of the dreary and desolate place in which the mystery dramas of the lesser rites were enacted. The 19th numbered major trump card is called the Sun. The original Rider-Waite tarot deck shows a naked toddler riding a large horse, holding a huge red banner and with a red feather in his or her hair. In the background is a wall with sunflowers. However, the original decks that came out of France had 2 children and no horse. This is the version that Hall discusses in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Hall says the 2 children represent Gemini, the twins. One is male and one is female. The 2 stand together in a garden surrounded by a magic ring of flowers, and behind them is a brick wall. Behind the wall, the sun is rising, and 13 teardrops are falling from its face. Eliphas Levi says the 2 children represent faith and reason, which must coexist as long as the universe endures. Hall quotes Levi as follows: "Human equilibrium requires 2 feet. The worlds gravitate by means of 2 forces. Generation needs 2 sexes. Such is the meaning of the Arcanum of Solomon, represented by the 2 pillars of the temple, Jachin and Boaz." Hall says equilibrium in the world is impossible if these 2 forces, represented in this world by the mind and the heart, cannot be brought into harmony with one another. The sun is the central feature of this card, and it represents truth, shining into the garden of the world. The 20th numbered major trump card of the tarot is called Judgment. It depicts figures rising from their tombs. Above them is a winged figure that Hall says is the angel Gabriel, who's blowing a trumpet. Hall's interpretation of this card is that it represents the liberation of man's threefold spiritual nature from the sepulcher of his material constitution, i.e. the physical body. In the foreground of the card are 3 prominent figures who represent the threefold nature. Hall says 3 figures are shown in the front of the card because only 1/3 of the human spirit actually resides in the physical body, while the other 2/3 make up the hermetic anthropos, or overman. Another name for this in modern terms is the higher self. Kurt de Gebelin writes that the coffin shown on this card may have been an afterthought of the card makers, and that the scene actually represents creation, not resurrection, and the blast of Gabriel's trumpet represents the creative word. He says when Gabriel blows his trumpet, man is liberated from his terrestrial limitations. The 21st numbered trump card of the tarot is the World. This card portrays a female figure who wears a scarf draped around her body. Hall says the scarf is shaped in the form of the Hebrew letter Kaf. The woman has her hands outstretched and she holds a wand in each of them. Her left leg is crossed behind her right leg. This causes her to assume the form of the alchemical symbol of sulfur. She's surrounded by a wreath that is shaped like the Vesica Pisces. We also see the cherubim of Ezekiel's vision on the 4 corners of the card. According to Hall, this card is called the microcosm and the macrocosm because in it are summed up every agency that contributes to the structure of creation. He writes that the figure in the form of sulfur represents the divine fire and heart of the great mystery. The wreath around the woman is nature, and it surrounds the fiery center. It also represents the crown of the initiate, which is given to those who master the 4 guardians and enter into the presence of unveiled truth. The cherubim represent the elements, worlds, forces, and planes issuing out of the divine fiery center of life. Hall concludes chapter 29 of The Secret Teachings of All Ages with a brief discussion of the minor trumps of the tarot. These are organized into 4 suits, which Hall says symbolize the 4 elements, the 4 corners of creation, and the 4 worlds of Kabbalism. These are Azalut, or emanation, the eternal unchanging divine world, Beriah, creation, considered heaven proper. It is the first separation from the divine and the location of the throne of God and archangels. Yesera, formation, the abode of the lower angels, men's souls, and the Garden of Eden. And Asaya, action, the material universe in which we live. Each of the suits contains the face are royal cards, i.e. Jack, King, and Queen, and the remaining cards in each suit are called pip cards or court cards, since each group looks like a royal court in miniature. Hall says the court cards contain a number of important Masonic symbols. According to Hall, the key to understanding the minor trumps is the tetragrammaton, or the four-letter name of Jehovah, Yad-He, Vav-He. The four suits also represent the major divisions of society. He says that cups are the priesthood, swords the military, coins the tradesmen, and rods the farming class. Kurt de Gebelin describes these in terms of what he calls political geography. Under this system, cups represent the northern countries, swords the Orient, coins the Occident, and rods the southern countries. The pip or court cards represent the nations composing each of these divisions. The kings are their governments, the queens their religions, the knights their histories and national characteristics, and the pages their arts and sciences. One of the most significant statements made by Hall in his analysis of the tarot comes at the end of chapter 29. It caught my attention because of all the attention paid in modern times to the use of the tarot as a method of divination. Depending on the source, there are unending answers to the question of how is the tarot used for divination purposes? What is divination? One definition of the term is the practice of determining the hidden significance or cause of events, sometimes foretelling the future, by various natural, psychological, and other techniques. From the earliest stages of civilization, societies have used many different methods for accomplishing this. It is one of the primary practices used by shamans, seers, priests, medicine men, sorcerers, and witches. However, listen to what Manly P. Hall says on this issue. Quote, "Elaborate treatises have been written concerning the use of the tarot cards in divination, but as this practice is contrary to the primary purpose of the tarot, no profit can result from its discussion." End quote. I found that to be extremely interesting in light of how most people view the tarot.